Okay, welcome back to everyone. Nice to see everyone here this evening. Welcome to everyone joining online as well. We're going to start our evening session where we're going to start with meditation like we typically do. And then I'm going to share a talk with you on the 5 precepts. These are 5 impactful decisions that you could make either wisely or unwisely. And the Buddha is going to give you guidance on how to make these decisions. Of course, it's up to you to make decisions however you like in your life, but you'll be able to see the natural law of Kamma here with these 5 precepts. I'm going to use the original words of the Buddha to help you understand them. And then I'm going to relate it to day-to-day decisions that you tend to make so you can see how to relate these teachings to your day-to-day life. So if you guys would like to do meditation, remember you learned walking meditation this morning. So if you guys would like to do some walking meditation, you can. I'm going to do some chanting and do some seated meditation, but you guys can do whatever you like. It's your choice. It's your practice. So for those of you guys that would like to do walking meditation, you can do the walking in the classroom. That'll give you another chance to practice it. If you like to do seated, lying, or standing, I'm going to do the chanting, and then that'll ease us into the meditation. Then I'll give you some guidance there, and then there'll be that period of time of quietness, and then we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting. And remember, these chants are not rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer. It's just to help ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. So if you guys would like to join along, however you'd like, either in the seated position or walking, it's up to you. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Otang Mahakawanang Apiwateyami Savakato Mahakawata Tammo Dhammang namasami Supatipano mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang sammuno Sakato rokavitu Anutero purisa Dhamma sati satatawa manusrang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind has moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanhang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rogavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusrang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to everyone. Nice to see everyone here this evening. Welcome to everyone joining online as well. I'm going to be sharing with you guys the 5 precepts, a householder's guide to daily practice. This is where you learn 5 impactful decisions that could be made either wisely and produce wholesome results or wholesome kamma, or unwisely, and it could produce unwholesome kamma. So I'm going to help you to learn this through the original words of the Buddha. When the Buddha was teaching new students, whenever new students would come to learn with the Buddha, the very first thing he would teach them is right view. What I taught you guys on the first day, on Monday, was the Four Noble Truths. What is the problem in the mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward, so that the students could understand that it was their own mind that was causing these discontent feelings. All the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. An individual needs to understand in a way that they can independently verify that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Because what people typically believe is that it's other people who are causing these feelings. So if you're going to get onto the path to enlightenment, you need to first understand that it's your own mind that causes these feelings. Because to get to enlightenment is to eliminate all of these discontent feelings. But you would never be able to eliminate them if you didn't understand what was causing it. So we'd always start brand new students with right view, the Four Noble Truths. But right after that, once they have a breakthrough to understanding what's causing these discontent feelings, then you would help them learn about moral conduct and improving your moral conduct. That's what you were learning in the Eightfold Path as part of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Because if there was a pipe, if there was an oil pipe that bursted and it was spewing oil all over the place, well, you're not going to go clean up the mess on the floor first. You're going to shut down the oil pipe and stop spewing oil all over the place. Well, it's the same thing with unwholesome moral conduct, that as long as you're putting out unwise moral conduct where you're being bitter and harsh and hostile to people, all of that's just coming back to you. So when the Buddha would teach, he would teach that right view, that Four Noble Truths first, but then he would move right into moral conduct, helping you to be able to shut down that oil pipe so that you're not continuing to spew unwise moral conduct into the world, because that's just producing more and more unwholesome results that you're going to have to deal with. It's just putting more oil on the ground that you got to now clean up. So the sooner you shut down the unwise moral conduct, the better for you and all the people around you. So these 5 precepts, they actually plug into the Eightfold Path, helping you to more fully understand wise moral conduct. Now, sometimes when people are actually learning something like this, they look at it as rules or commandments. It's important not to see it that way. Sometimes people look at it as black and white. The Buddha never taught that way. If you've heard that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, the Buddha never taught this. I'm going to help you see his original words on these precepts so you can see that he never ever taught that way. That sounds like black and white. That sounds like rules and commandments, and that's not what the Buddha taught. So I'm going to teach you with the original words of the Buddha, but then I'm going to relate it to day-to-day decisions that you make so that you can see how to take this precept, how to take this teaching and apply it to your day-to-day decision making. And just like always, if you guys have questions, you're more than welcome to ask those here. If you guys could use the microphones, that way the people online can hear. And then online, you guys can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and unmute your microphone to ask any and all questions that you like that way. So just like we were talking this morning, whenever you're learning moral conduct from the Buddha, it's important to understand that what he's teaching you is the natural law of Kamma. Now, you might have heard this referred to as karma, but the word Kamma is from the Pali language, and the original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language, so people tend to use this word if they're referring to the words of the Buddha. Well, if this translated to just one English word, I would use it because it'd be easier for everyone, but it doesn't. It means cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. It's not anything mystical or magical. It's not punishments and rewards. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. It's literally like a sequence of events. Whatever decisions you make, either wisely or unwisely, it's going to produce either wholesome Kamma or wholesome results, or unwholesome Kamma or unwholesome results. And when you lack wisdom of this natural law, you're going to tend to go out into the world and make unwise decisions. And you'll experience unwholesome results coming back to you. And typically what we do in the unenlightened state, because of our lack of wisdom of this natural law, is we just blame it on other people. We think the unwholesome things we experience in our life is because of others, or we might say it's good luck or bad luck, or destiny or fate, or God, or some entity called the universe. But as long as we do this, you can't actually ever learn the wisdom to improve what you're experiencing. You'll just stay stuck. But when you understand what you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis is from decisions that you're making, now you can just cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. So that's what sharing these 5 precepts are, is to help you to cultivate wisdom about the natural law of Kamma. I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing in your life. You are an adult. You can make decisions for yourself. I'm just helping you to be able to see the natural law of Kamma through the teachings of the Buddha. So as I share these 5 precepts, I'm helping you to be able to understand the natural law of Kamma, of cause and effect. And some of the things that I share might be different than the way that your mind currently thinks about the world. And that's really helpful, because if you're in a classroom where everything the teacher says is what you already understand and what you already know, you're in the wrong classroom. There's no growth. There's no development for you. But if you're in a classroom where the things that are being shared are different than what you currently think about the world, that's an opportunity for you to ask questions and get more information. So as I'm sharing the teachings of the Buddha with you here, if it conflicts with what you currently think about the world, be sure to ask questions and get clarification, because I'll be able to help you and talk you through this so that you can perhaps see what I'm seeing and what the Buddha saw now, or perhaps you need to reflect on what it is that I share with you, and thinking about it later, then you'll come to another conclusion perhaps. So I'm going to start with this first precept. These are the words of the Buddha, oftentimes translated as no killing, right? The Buddha didn't teach that. This is actually what he taught. He says, abandoning the taking of life, refraining from taking life, without stick or sword, diligent, compassionate, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. So whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, if there's anything you come across that you don't understand, you need to really investigate it and examine it, because there's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha. You're not believing a bunch of things and hoping something good happens when you die. You're learning, growing, and developing in this life and cultivating wisdom. And sometimes one of the things you need to cultivate wisdom about is language and vocabulary. one of the things that I found out when I started investigating the teachings of the Buddha is there was words that I was using that it wasn't used that same way in the teachings of the Buddha. Because of impermanence, everybody uses words in a different way, and we think about things in a different way. So when you come across a teaching like this, one of the things you can see is he's talking about living beings, right? So the first thing you should ask yourself is, what is a living being? Don't assume that you actually know what a living being is, because he's talking about living compassionately for all living beings, but you need to know what is a living being. So the Buddha has a teaching called the Five Aggregates. I'm actually going to be teaching this as part of this retreat. Sometimes you might think of it as 5 criteria or 5 elements. These are the 5 criteria of what make a living being a living being. And this definition is held up for 2,500 years. So I'm going to share with you what the 5 aggregates are so that you know how to determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being. Because the Buddha is teaching you to live compassionately for all living beings, so you need to know what is a living being. Because anytime you put out harm to a living being, this harm is going to come back to you. So by understanding what a living being is, you'll know not to cause harm to these living beings. So there's these 5 aggregates or 5 criteria or 5 elements. And you know that you're a living being. So when I share these 5 aggregates with you, don't believe this teaching either, right? You need to independently verify whether what I'm sharing with you is true or not, because you have all 5 of these aggregates. The first one is physical form. A living being is going to have physical form. So you have physical form. You have skin and tissue and bones and things like this. This is a physical body. You have physical form. That's the first criteria that a living being will have. The second criteria is that a living being will have feelings. Pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. The third one is that a living being will have perceptions. What perceptions are views or opinions about the world that may or may not be true, but nonetheless, a living being will have perceptions. They will have views and opinions about the world. The fourth one is they will have what's called volitional formations. A volitional formation is a choice or decision. A living being will have free will. They will make their own choices and decisions. And then the fifth one is they will have a consciousness or a mind, right? So you understand that you have all 5 of these. You have physical form, you have feelings, you have perceptions. I'm sure you have views and opinions about the world. You have volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, and you have a consciousness, you have a mind. So does a squirrel, so does a rabbit, so does a bird, so does a dog, so does a cow, so does an elephant. Since you guys went to see elephants today, they have all 5 aggregates. They are a living being, right? But once you verify that and you start seeing that all these beings are living beings, you don't just stop there with your independent verification of the teachings of the Buddha, because you would like to look at it from all angles. Take something that you know is not a living being, like this chair that I'm sitting in. Does it have physical form? Yeah, it has physical form, right? You can actually feel it. It's physical form. Does it have feelings? No, it doesn't have feelings, right? Does it have perceptions? Does it have a view or opinion? Is it like, hey, this guy sitting on me is really too heavy. He should get off, right? It doesn't have views and opinions about the world, right? Does it have volitional formations? Does it make choices and decisions? Can it pick itself up, walk down the street and put itself back down again? Can't do that, right? And does it have a consciousness or a mind? No, it doesn't, right? That's why we know it's not a living being, because it doesn't meet the criteria of the 5 aggregates. So this is a teaching that we're going to dive into as part of this retreat. We have a class where I'm going to be teaching this as well as the 6 sense bases. But for now, you can just understand that those are the 5 aggregates, and that's how you determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being. You can also use this here. This isn't the natural laws, but it will apply in 99.999% of the situations. A living being will typically come from an egg and a sperm. A living being will always have a consciousness. So if they came from an egg, a sperm, and a consciousness, it will be a living being. But there's some living beings that don't come from an egg and a sperm, but they all have a consciousness. So that's why you need to know the 5 aggregates. But as you're getting to know those, you can actually use something like this, that a living being is going to come from an egg, a sperm, and it's going to have a consciousness. And when you understand this, then you can understand things like plants, bacteria, viruses, things like this. They're not living beings. This is one of the challenges that we have when we're in the unenlightened state and we don't look at the language that we're using, the vocabulary. We oftentimes use words and language that doesn't represent true reality. So someone might say, oh, don't kill that tree. Or I'm going to kill this virus in my body by taking this antibiotic. Or I'm going to kill this bacteria in my body by taking this antibiotic. You're not actually killing the tree because the tree's not alive. That's what we tend to think of it as, but it's not alive. It's not a living being. Same thing with the bacteria in your body. When you take an antibiotic, you're not killing it. You're actually eliminating it out of the body because it doesn't have all 5 aggregates. You can see this through the 5 aggregates, but you can also see it through the natural law of Kamma. Because anytime you cause harm to a living being, harm is going to come back to you. So if this bacteria in the body is a living being, that means if I eliminated it, if I killed it, I would experience unwholesome Kamma. But when you eliminate a bacteria out of the body, you experience wholesome Kamma, that you become healthier, right? That is wholesome Kamma. So you can see it through the 5 aggregates, but you can also see it through the natural law of Kamma. The same thing with like a tree or a plant. We're not actually killing it, we're harvesting it because we need these resources in order to survive and maintain our life. So you're not killing the broccoli, you're harvesting it, right? You're now harvesting that plant. It's not killing the plant because it's not a living being. But oftentimes we use language in a way that doesn't represent true reality. So we need to be able to look at it closely through the natural laws to be able to see this. And now we start to understand what a living being is. Okay. So once we understand what a living being is, now you start to understand that the Buddha is teaching you to live compassionately. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others, right? That's what the word compassion means. On one side of this, somebody would be indifferent and they could care less what goes on with other living beings. On the other side, there would be anxiety and worry. Like, oh my gosh, those people don't have food. They don't have clothes. They don't have clothes. They don't have shelter. Oh my goodness, I'm so worried, having so much anxiety. But when you bring your mind to the middle, you can have compassion, which is the concern for the misfortune of others. That's what brings your mind to the middle, where you can then have calmness and composure, and you can practice this mental quality. Compassion isn't a feeling, it's a mental quality, right? Whether you choose to do something about this unfortunate situation that this being is having is a whole nother question. But you can practice the compassion, whether you choose to do something about it or not, which is practicing the mental state of having concern for the misfortune of others. So I'm going to walk you through a few of these things because these are all intentional killings, but whether somebody chooses to do these things or not is a choice for them to make. I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. I'm going to give you examples of these where it could be a wise decision to do these, or it could be unwise. Right? So these are all intentional killings. Euthanization of a human or an animal, termination of a pregnancy, suicide, assisted suicide, capital punishment, war, government-sponsored killing, murder. These are all intentional killings. But whether someone chooses to do it or not is a choice for them to make. It's not up to me to tell them what they should or shouldn't do, but I'm going to give you examples of both where it could potentially be wise to do some of these things, or it could be unwise. So let's take one here, which is termination of a pregnancy. Now, some people think about this as a political topic, right? In some communities, if you talk about termination of a pregnancy, people get really up in arms about this, and they think it's a political discussion. It's not a political discussion, the way that I see it, that this is a medical technology that we have, and in some cases, it can be helpful and beneficial for people, and in other cases, maybe not. But at the end of the day, it's a choice for that person to make. It's not up to me to tell people what they should or shouldn't do with their bodies. In fact, if somebody came to me and said, David, should I terminate the pregnancy or not? I wouldn't say yes or no because it's not my choice to say that. I'll say if you terminate the pregnancy, here's what you'll experience. And if you don't terminate it, here's what you'll experience. But it's up to that person to decide for themselves whether or not they're going to terminate their pregnancy. But I'm going to give you scenarios here where it could be wise potentially, or it could potentially be unwise. But again, it's up to the person to decide for themselves. So obviously I'm not a female and I don't have a womb, but if I did, and there was a fetus, if there was a living being growing inside the womb, and the doctors and medical professionals shared with me that, hey, this fetus is never going to live a viable life outside the womb. We can tell through our medical technology that it's never going to live a viable life. And the longer you leave it inside the womb, it's threatening your life and you could die at any moment. And we suggest that you terminate the pregnancy. In this situation, it could be wise to terminate the pregnancy. And this is living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. Because the very first being that you need to have compassion for is yourself. If you don't have compassion for yourself, you can't have compassion for other beings. So this is why that in this situation, it could potentially be very wise for you to terminate that pregnancy. But then let's just say I was regularly having sex with lots of different people. I was regularly getting pregnant, and now I'm using termination of a pregnancy as birth control. And now let's just say that I'm doing this maybe 5, 6, 8, 10 times. Each time I do this, it's going to wear on my body, and I'm going to start experiencing all this unwholesome kamma where my own body is going to become less and less healthy of having this medical procedure, because you can only have it so many times that it actually starts causing harm to your own body, right? Because the first scenario, that's probably like a once or maybe twice in a lifetime situation where if I was using termination of pregnancy as birth control, now it's going to start causing harm to my own body. But again, whether someone chooses to do that or not, it's a choice for them to make. I'm just helping you to be able to see the natural law of Kamma here. So you can see that this isn't black and white. You need to be able to look at the gray area and navigate that based on what it is that you understand about the natural law. Let's take another one. Let's take one that's not up here. We were actually talking about it earlier, like termites. Let's just say you have termites that have infested your house, right? This is actually a real situation. I actually had termites one time at my house. I hadn't even ever seen a termite before. And my wife came to me and she said, "We have termites." And I was like, "What? I've never even seen a termite. Where is the termite?" And she took me around the house and she was showing me the different termites. And I was like, "Oh, wow, this is really interesting. I've never had these before. I've never seen one before." So what I did in order to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings is I got online and I started doing some research to see if there was a way to terminate and get rid of these termites without actually killing them. So I started researching. That's one of the beautiful things about the time that we live right now. We live in the information age, that we can actually look at these kinds of things. So I was looking online to see if there was a way to eliminate the termites without killing them. What I found out is no, there's no way to do that. So I said to my wife, I said, "I think we're going to need to call somebody to come and take care of this." So she called somebody to come and they did their thing. They drilled holes around the house and put this substance down that they then ate and took back to their nest, and it ended up killing them. Right? So in this situation, I was living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because it's important to see what the Buddha is not saying here. The Buddha is not saying to preserve all life at all cost. That's not what he's teaching. Sometimes that's what people hear in their mind, because the unenlightened mind likes to look at things as black and white. It makes it very difficult for the unenlightened mind to navigate this gray area. So sometimes what people see and hear is preserve all life at all costs. But that's not what the Buddha is actually teaching you. He's teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. This relates back to something that I taught last night when I was teaching craving, anger, and ignorance, the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots. These are the 3 pollutions that are in the mind. What these precepts are designed to do is help you to eliminate your craving, your anger, and your ignorance. Because if you actively went out into the world and you were actively trying to kill, you have a certain amount of craving in the mind. There's a longing, yearning, and there's anger, and there's ill will. And where that's coming from is the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, right? So that's going to produce unwholesome results if you go out and actively try to kill. But in this scenario where the termites were infesting our home, the termites are now choosing to cause harm, and now harm is going to come to them. This is the natural law of Kamma. And that's one of the unfortunate things about being in the animal world, is that they lack the consciousness to be able to make wise decisions. Where for us humans, if we were actually a being that ingested wood as part of our diet, and that's what we needed in order to survive, we have the level of consciousness that we would go out to the forest and we would eat wood in the forest because we know that that's not causing any harm to anybody. Where these animals, they don't understand that. They don't have a level of consciousness that allows them to be able to make that decision to go eat wood somewhere else. So they were choosing to eat our house. So now that they were causing harm, remember, causing harm to physical body, to material possessions, or reputation, whenever you cause harm as a living being, that harm is going to come back to you. So these termites were causing harm. And if there was a way to get rid of them without killing them, we would have done that. And that's living compassionately. We didn't have a craving to kill. We didn't just run out and try to kill them right away. We weren't doing it out of anger and hostility and bitterness, because that's what the Buddha is teaching you to eliminate. Instead, we are making a wise decision that if we let these animals continue to eat our home, then we're going to be out of a home ourselves. So in order to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, we need to live compassionately for ourselves, right? If we weren't living compassionately for ourselves, if we just let these beings eat our home, we wouldn't be living compassionately for all living beings, because we need to start with ourselves. So that's one example that's not actually even up here. Let's take another one here. Let's take war. So a government could say to their citizens, hey, go over there and kill those people. We would like you to go over there and kill those people. And if you kill those people, we are completely fine with that. But if you come over here on our land and you kill these people, we're going to arrest you for murder. Right? This is the problem with human laws, that human laws are imperfect because they're created by human beings. But you can't escape from this natural law of Kamma. If somebody actually did this, the government might not arrest you for going to kill, but you're still going to experience the natural law of Kamma. This is why if you go off to war, you're very likely to get injured yourself or killed yourself. You might get a brain injury. You might get an amputation. You might get addicted to drugs or alcohol, substances. When you come back from a war, oftentimes people have a hard time integrating back into society, getting jobs and housing. Sometimes people even commit suicide when they come back from wars. This is the unwholesome Kamma because of the unwise decision to go off to war and actively kill. In this situation, you're not living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. But whether someone does that, again, it's a choice for them to make. But you can see the natural law here, that it doesn't function based on the human laws. It's a functioning at a much higher level. So there's multiple up here. And if you guys have any questions about these, when we get to that point, you guys are welcome to ask questions about these or any others that you would like to ask questions about. Sometimes people ask me questions about a DNR. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. This is called a do not resuscitate order. This is a legal document that you can put in place while you're alive to inform your relatives that should this being die, don't use medical technology to bring me back to life. And sometimes students say, am I living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings if I do that? And the answer is, yeah, you actually haven't killed anybody at all. You're just saying, I'm comfortable with death. Don't bring me back to life. So if you decide you ever would like to have one of these, you can do that, and you're still practicing this. You're not operating through craving, anger, and ignorance here. You're just saying, I'm comfortable with death. I don't need to come back to life. This isn't something you have to do, but sometimes students have done it, and they're like, hey, am I practicing the 5 precepts here? Then sometimes people ask me about defense and protection. You know, if you're at home, 2 a.m. in the morning, sleeping in your bed, and you wake up in the middle of the night hearing somebody break through your window downstairs, people say, what should I do if I'm living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings? Well, the first thing I usually share with them is that those people aren't bringing you chocolate and flowers. I can guarantee you that. Breaking in your house at 2 a.m. in the morning, they're not bringing you chocolate and flowers. They're there to cause harm. And you need to be able to understand that they are looking to cause harm. And if possible, what I suggest for people to do is just get out of the house, if you can get out of the house, right? Because there's people like police that have tools and training and equipment that they can come there and deal with that kind of situation. If this person wants to break things, if they want to steal things, anything like that, they want to damage things, okay, up to them. But at least you keep safe. This being is safe. But remember, this isn't black and white. The Buddha's not giving you a decision tree. He's not saying if this happens, do this. if this happens, do that, because that would be a permanent answer for every single situation. Instead, what he's doing is he's helping you to move to this higher consciousness where you can think through all the variables that you're experiencing, and then you can make a decision that's wise in the present moment. So in this situation, if someone was breaking into your home, you would potentially look to try to get out if you could, but maybe you look out your window and there's a gang of people outside. That's one of the variables, right? There could be a whole gang of 20 people outside. Not wise to necessarily go out when you see that, right? Or maybe the entire neighborhood's on fire. Maybe there was a forest fire and people are going around looting now, and maybe the whole neighborhood's on fire and it's unwise to go outside. So you need to be able to move to this higher consciousness and think through all the variables and decide what would be wise or unwise in any given situation. It's not plug and play that if this happens, do that, or if this happens, do that. So if this person coming into your home has you and or your family backed up into the corner and they've got a stick and they're going to start hitting you with the stick or stabbing you with a knife or shooting you with a gun, if you need to defend yourself, you can do that. And you won't experience any unwholesome karma. You're going to experience wholesome karma because this person's coming at you to cause harm, and now you're causing harm to them in order to stop this harm coming to you. So that person is experiencing their karma, that they came to cause harm, and now harm is coming to them. But what I would encourage you to do is cause the least amount of harm as possible, right? If they have a stick, get a bigger stick. Right? If they have a knife, get a bigger knife, right? And try to stop this harm from coming to you as best as possible with doing the least amount of harm as possible. So again, the Buddha here is not saying preserve all life at all cost. That's not what he's saying. If you stood there and let this person stab you with a knife and you were just like, oh, well, just go ahead. You can stab me with the knife. I'm okay with that. That's not living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So if you find yourself in this situation, defend this being who you are, right? And now do the least amount of harm as possible to stop that harm from coming to you. So sometimes students ask me about plant-based food and eating vegan, whether this would be helpful for them or not. It would be helpful, but whether you choose to do this or not, it's a choice for you to make. That is, when we eat animal flesh, we're not just eating the animal flesh, we're actually eating all the drugs and hormones and toxins that are inside the animal flesh. That there's been research that shows that it's not just animal flesh, that there's actually other things inside the meat. They've taken wild fish out of clean running streams in places like America, and they found 80 or 90 different substances in the fish that shouldn't have been there. They found things like cocaine and antidepressants and things of this nature. And when they tested it, they could see that those substances were inside the meat. So when you eat animal flesh, you're not just eating the animal flesh, you're eating those substances too, and it'll cause more sickness in the body, and it'll affect your mind as well. So if you're ever interested in moving to a plant-based food supply, you'll see that it actually helps you to experience better health in the body and the mind as well. But again, whether you choose to do this or not, it's a choice for you to make. Scientists do say that when we first came into this world, human beings were plant-based eaters. That's what they say. But remember, you're not interested in believing anybody at all. You need to look for independently verifiable truth to verify whether that's true or not. And the thing that I would encourage you to look at to be able to independently verify this is your teeth. That if you look at your teeth are very similar to a cow or a horse, that our teeth aren't designed for ripping and tearing of meat. That's what, like a lion and a tiger, they have those types of teeth because they rip and tear meat. Our teeth are very similar to a horse and a cow, which each actually eats plants all the time. So apparently the way that this had unfolded is that at one time we used to all eat plants and we used to live in the forest. And then we got so populous that we had so many people that we ran out of plants in the forest. So we started seeing that animals were killing other animals and eating them. So we started being scavengers, that we started to run the animals away. We'd get together in like a pack of people and we would run the animals away and we would take over their hunt, and that they killed this animal and we would start eating their animal. So we were scavengers. But then that wasn't enough meat for us because we kept growing and growing and growing in population. So we started doing organized hunting, where we would get together and we would organize, and then we would go out in the forest and we would hunt and drag the meat back to our cave, I guess, and then we would eat the animal. Well, that wasn't enough meat for us, so that's why we went to manufactured farming and how people manufacture animals. And now as a farmer, if they're looking to increase their profit, they might be trying to grow their meat very, very fast, so they might put drugs and hormones and toxins into their animals in order to grow them really fast in order to get more profit. And then when you're eating that meat, you're actually getting affected by that with your body and your mind. So even though there might be someone else who killed the animal, when you eat it, you're actually affecting the health of your body and your mind. So if you decide you would like to move to a plant-based food supply, you're going to see that it helps you with your health of your body and your mind. And if you ever decide to do this, I would recommend you do it gradually rather than just trying to snap your fingers and instantly do it, where maybe one day you eat plant-based, one day you eat meat, one day plant-based, or one meal plant-based, one meal meat, because you're going to need to find new restaurants, new suppliers, new recipes. You're going to need to gradually bring something like that up into your life and then gradually decrease whatever else it is that you're doing. So this will help you, but again, whether you choose to do it or not, it's a choice for you to make. So do you guys have any questions on this precept here? No questions? Okay. Let me see if we have anything online here. Hello to everyone online. All right, I don't see any questions online. Okay, so now we'll go to the next one. The next one here, this is the words of the Buddha, typically translated as no stealing, right? Like I shared with you guys, the Buddha didn't teach rules and commandments. That's not what he taught. He's giving you much more illuminating language to be able to understand this, okay? So what he says is, abandoning the taking of what is not given, living purely, accepting what is given, awaiting what is given without stealing. Okay. So of course, what he's teaching you is not to steal here, because when you steal, there's a craving, there's anger, and there's ignorance. Because remember, that's what his precepts are doing, is helping you to eliminate the pollution of mind. Every single teaching that he shares is all about helping you eliminate the pollution in the mind. If we steal from somebody, we have a certain craving. We're longing, yearning. We really want that thing. And we don't want to wait and do it ourselves and earn it ourselves. We're stealing it from somebody else. And there's a certain amount of anger and hostility and ill will towards that other person. Because when we steal that thing from them, they're not going to be able to use it. And now there's a certain amount of ignorance or unknowing of true reality. We don't realize that this is actually going to cause us harm too. So for example, if I stole somebody's car, I'm causing them harm, right? They can't go to work to be able to sustain their life. They can't go to the store in order to buy basic necessities to sustain their life. And if they have children, they can't take their children to school. I've just caused this person harm. And now harm is going to come to me, right? Because when I get found out that I stole this car, I'm going to have all kinds of problems to deal with. So that's why the Buddha teaches that it would be unwise to steal. We can also understand through this precept that it would be unwise to assume that something can be used or taken. So for example, let's just say that I am a college student and I'm turning in a paper. And when I come into the classroom, the professor's not there. And there's a stapler on their desk. And I haven't stapled my paper. I forgot to do that at home. Well, if I come into the classroom and I just assume that I can use the stapler and I start using it, and now the professor walks in, they're like, hey, what are you doing? That's my stapler, right? Maybe they're attached to their stapler, right? And I'm just like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean, I'm sorry, right? And now they're getting angry and frustrated, not realizing that their mind is causing their own frustration. And now my unwholesome kamma is that they might fail me on that paper, or they might fail me in the entire class, right? And that's my unwholesome kamma, because what would have been wiser, if you understand this precept, is wait for the professor to come in. Excuse me, ma'am, excuse me, sir, can I use your stapler? They're either going to say yes or no. And if they say no, then I'll just go find one somewhere else. Maybe I'll go buy one at the store. I'll go talk to another professor. But if I assume that it can be used, now I'm putting myself in a situation that is going to produce unwholesome results. This is a decision that I'm making. So our decisions are going to impact us and produce either wholesome kamma or unwholesome kamma. But remember, this isn't black and white. There's a gray area here. You need to move to this higher consciousness and you need to think through the variables, right? Let's just say I'm in my village And when I walk outside, I see another villager that was working in their yard, and they cut their arm and they're bleeding profusely out of their arm. And as long as they keep bleeding like this, they can die and they can bleed out. But my other neighbor has a fabric on their porch or on their front stoop. And I could be like, oh my goodness, I could grab that perhaps, wrap up their arm in a tourniquet, and then send them off to the hospital, right? I'm not going to go to their door, ding dong, and just kind of wait for them to come downstairs, right? Just kind of wait and wait and wait. Ding dong. This guy's bleeding out profusely, right? He's going to die any moment. Ding dong. Right? I'm not going to do that, right? That would be unwise. So I'm just going to grab that fabric, wrap up a tourniquet, get the ambulance to the village, send them off on the ambulance. But then because I know this precept, I'm going to go to the other neighbor, ding dong. Now I'm going to wait. And then when they come downstairs, hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. Good morning. Sawadee krap. I'm so sorry to bother you. There was a neighbor that had an accident in the village, and there was this fabric that you had on your front porch, and I used it to make a tourniquet. I'm so sorry that I did that without asking you. I would like to replace this for you. Could you tell me where you bought that from so that I can go get one for you? Or if you'd like the money, I'll just give you the money and you can use it yourself to get it, right? So you can have this conversation now, right? So this isn't black and white. You need to move to a higher consciousness and see all the variables at play. Right? So this is something that the Buddha is teaching you with all of these. Same thing here with accepting what is given. What the Buddha is teaching you is that when someone practices generosity with you, that it would be wise for you to accept that generosity. Because when someone's practicing generosity, it's helping enhance the quality of their mind. It's training their mind to let go. That's the whole thing that the mind's doing with the unenlightened state, is it's having craving, desire, attachment, where it's clinging and holding on. So in a society of people where they're practicing generosity, people are regularly practicing generosity. So if somebody offers you a gift, the Buddha teaches you to accept it, accept what is given, because this person is enhancing the quality of their mind by practicing generosity. If you shut it down, they're not getting that opportunity to practice generosity. And if you do that enough, eventually people will stop practicing generosity with you. So if grandma gives you that sweater at the holidays, and you look at that sweater and you're like, I'm never going to wear that sweater ever, what the Buddha is teaching you is accept it. Right? And now once you accept that gift, it's helping to enhance the quality of grandma's mind because she's the one who offered this generosity. But now what you can do is you could choose to give it to somebody else rather than putting it into the closet and just let it sit there and waste away and all the resources go to waste. If grandma gets angry that you gave the sweater away to somebody else, that's because grandma has a craving, desire, attachment in her mind. She has an expectation. She didn't practice pure generosity. She was expecting you to wear it. Right? So grandma's anger, if she ends up getting angry, you did not cause this, right? In some cultures, they call this regifting, and they think this is really bad and you shouldn't give a gift away that somebody gave you. This isn't true. If someone's practicing pure generosity, they're giving you a gift without any expectation of anything in return. So now you accept that gift and now you give it to somebody else. And then that person looks at the sweater and is like, I'm going to give it to someone else. And then they give it to someone else. And next thing you know, 10 hands down the road, someone's like, oh my gosh, that's the most beautiful sweater I've ever seen. I'm going to wear that every day of my life. Right? So now it found somebody who really will enjoy this sweater. Right? So that's what the Buddha is teaching you here. But remember, this is moving to a higher consciousness. It's not black and white. It's not always do it this way and never do it this way. Because if someone tried to offer you crystal methamphetamine or heroin, are you going to accept what is given? No, you're not going to accept what is given, right? You're going to be like, hey, I'm okay, buddy. Thanks a lot. I appreciate the offer. I'm fine, right? You're not going to accept that, right? So you need to move to this higher consciousness and be able to see what would be wise or unwise. So generally, you're accepting what is given. But there's going to be some situations where you don't accept what is given. And that was just one example of one. Then we have another one here, awaiting what is given. This is that when, say, somebody is going on a trip and as they go. By the way, if you guys are cold, you're welcome to turn that off. The remote control is back there by the light switch. That's why I keep it back there. So you guys are welcome to adjust it or turn it off, because I see you guys starting to spread out back there by the light switch. Yeah, you guys are welcome to adjust it. That's why I keep it back there, because this remote, I can't get to it back there. So this next one here, awaiting what is given. This is like, say you have a life partner who you're living with and they're going on holiday or maybe a business trip. If you were to load them up with a bunch of expectations from you of what it is that you want, if they go off and they can find those things and they bring them back, you'll be really happy and excited about that. But if they don't bring it back, you'll be frustrated and angry if you have expectations in your mind. So the Buddha teaches you not to put expectations on other people of what you want them to give you. That's the longing, yearning. Instead, if somebody goes on a trip and they would like to give you a gift, just let them do that on their own. You don't have to load them up and burden them with any expectations from you. That's what it means to await what is given. But remember, this is not black and white. I've had students come here before and they say, hey, David, I'm going back to the USA. I'll be there for 6 weeks. Is there anything that you would like from the USA that I can bring you? Right? In this situation, they're practicing generosity now. Right? So they're offering for me. I'm not asking for anything. I'm awaiting what is given, but they're offering to me to be able to go get me something. Right? So you need to be able to see these different scenarios. And if you're ever having any complications, to be able to see what would be wise or unwise, that's where you consult with a teacher. And I won't tell you what you should or shouldn't do. I'm just going to teach you the natural law, and then you make the decision that you think is best for you. So do you guys have any questions on this one? No questions here? Okay. So now we'll go to the next one. The next one, this is oftentimes translated as no sexual misconduct, but there's a lot more details here that the Buddha is giving you, right? So you can see that he didn't teach those things, right? So here's what he shares. Abandoning unchastity, abandoning sexual relations with women, men who are protected by their mother, father and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by teachings, who have a husband, wife, or partner, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. So here he's saying a whole bunch of different things. Up here where he's talking about avoiding having sex with people who are protected by their family, he's talking about having sex with minors. If we were to have sex with a minor, this is causing harm, right? If it was 8-year-old, 12-year-old child, they're being taught by their parents, they're learning, they're growing, they're developing. If we choose to have sex with this person, it's taking them away from that and it's affecting their mind. If you've had sex before, you know how impactful it was the first time you had sex. And if we did that with young children, it's going to harm that person. It's going to harm that family. And that's why the Buddha teaches that it would be unwise to do that. In most places in the world, the human laws match this. Most places, it's illegal to have sex with children as well, the human laws, but not everywhere. There's some places that it's actually legal to have sex with an 8-year-old child or a 12-year-old child. But if you look at those places, they're actually really having difficulties with their economy, with their education system, with their political system. The society is not being run very well, and they're having all kinds of difficulties and struggles. That's the unwholesome Kamma that they're experiencing because of it. So if we have sex with children, it's going to cause harm, and that's why the Buddha is teaching us not to do that it would be unwise. Up here where he says, whose violation entails a penalty, that's having sex without consent. If we were to forcibly try to have sex with someone or rape somebody, this would cause harm to that individual. And that's why harm could come to us in that situation, that we could get beat up, we could get murdered, we could get sexually transmitted diseases. These are all the harms that we experience because of our choice to cause harm. Then up here where he says abandoning unchastity. Do you guys know what chastity is? Everybody know what chastity is? I'll explain it to you guys if you don't. Okay. You guys don't know. Okay. So in ancient times, fathers would put chastity belts on their daughters. What a chastity belt is metal underwear. And the father would have a lock and key. And it was only the father that would be able to open the metal underwear and allow his daughter to now have sex with people. this would be chastity. This would be like having sex with nobody. I can't imagine walking around with metal underwear, but this is what happened during these time frames. So that's what chastity would be. Unchastity would be just the opposite, is be having sex with multiple people, countless different people. So the Buddha is teaching that it would be unwise to do that, to abandon unchastity, because having sex with multiple people, that's where we get sexually transmitted diseases. That's our unwholesome Kamma, as a result of choosing to have multiple partners and constantly be having sex with lots of people. So that's what the Buddha is showing you here, is cause and effect, action and result. He's not trying to convince you to do anything. He's not trying to impose any kind of moral code on you. He already got to peace. He already got to joy. He's just explaining to you how to do that. Whereas if you're out there having sex with lots of people and you start getting sexually transmitted diseases, how are you going to get to peace and joy that you're now dealing with maybe something like HIV or some other types of things that can be very detrimental to our health? So that's why the Buddha is teaching you those kinds of things. In some cultures, you might meet a partner, and then when you meet a partner, you might talk to your family and ask them if we can move in together in order to be able to then save up enough money and then go buy a house for ourselves. If you do this kind of thing, like here in Thailand, they do this, this is still practicing this precept. This isn't what the Buddha is talking about people that are protected by their mother, father, brother, sister, and relatives. Because in this situation, the family has accepted the relationship. So in this situation, you're still practicing this precept if your family is giving you permission to stay at the home and live with your partner. Up here where it says who are protected by teachings, that's if somebody has decided to remain celibate. If you were to try to lure that person away from their celibacy, you're actually causing harm. Because in order to get to the fourth stage of enlightenment, where the mind is actually enlightened, you would need to completely eliminate sexual activity. You can get to the second stage of enlightenment and still be having a sexual relationship. But once you are interested in moving to the third or the fourth stage, where the mind's ultimately enlightened, you would need to eliminate sexual activity. There's nothing wrong with sexual activity. It's not immoral or anything like that. It's just that as long as you have a craving for sex in your mind, you're not going to be able to have permanent peace and permanent joy, because there's going to be situations where you can have sex and you're going to be very happy and excited about that and feel all kinds of pleasant feelings. But then there's going to be some situations where you want sex and you can't get it, and now your mind's going to be agitated or frustrated or annoyed. So what some people do, particularly younger people, if you're interested in having a family or if you're in a relationship or you guys are having sex, is they will do all the work on the path to enlightenment to get up to that second stage of enlightenment, and they will even do other work on the path to enlightenment in that second stage of enlightenment. And then after they've done what they needed to do, maybe they're 40, 50, 60, 80 years old, who knows? It's up to each individual to decide. Then they might decide, okay, now I'm going to give up sex and I'm going to move towards the actual enlightened mental state where the mind can be completely peaceful and joyful. So whether you ever choose to do that or not, it's a choice for you to make. Most of you guys, or some of you guys, are maybe younger, maybe you're in a sexual relationship and that's what you would like to do. That's fine. That's your choice. But just know that you're not going to be able to get to 100% peace and 100% joy as long as you have sexual activity, because there's going to be some situations where you can get it and some situations where you can't, and you're going to be agitated or frustrated or annoyed in those situations. So Thailand makes this very easy for you, that for people who are not having sex, they will be wearing orange robes and shaving their hair. So you'll know that those people are choosing to remain celibate. Here in Thailand, people who wear white clothes and shave their hair, they're also not having sex. I don't wear white clothes and shave my hair because I'm trying to advertise that I don't have sex. But you can know that, right? That the people that wear white clothes and shave their hair, they don't have sex. So if you're interested in having sex, find somebody that doesn't do those kinds of things. So I could never tell you, several years ago that I would be at this point in my life and having given up sexual activity. It's something that's really enjoyable, right? It's really pleasurable. But I also didn't understand at those times in my life that there's actually something better than sexual activity. And it's actually this enlightened mental state that we can't imagine when we're young and we're having sex, that there's actually something better in the world than sex. But I'm sharing with you there is. And this enlightened mental state is much, much, much better than any sex that you'll ever have. If there was a way to get to enlightenment while still having sex, I would have figured it out. And I would have been very pleased to report that to you guys. I would have shared that with you. I'd have been like, hey, look, this is how you do it, right? But there isn't a way to do it. And I tried. Believe me, I tried, right? So there's something out there that's actually better than sex, and it's this enlightened mental state. But whether you choose to actually get to this point or not, it's a choice for you to make. If you're in a relationship or you're young and you're looking to have a family or whatever it is, have sex if that's what you're interested in having. You're not doing anything wrong. The Buddha here is just teaching you how to do it in a way that you don't cause harm, so that way that you're not going to experience harmful results coming back to you. Because one of the ways to extinguish a craving is to actually fulfill it. One of the ways that you can actually eliminate craving for sex is just do it. Right? Because eventually you get to the point where it's like, yeah, been there, done that. How many times can I do it that way? Right? It's like, you kind of get a little bit bored of it, that you've done it so much. So that's one of the ways that you can actually extinguish this, is by actually doing it. So here, when I talk about this, sometimes people are a little bit concerned about eliminating sex. And one of the things that I started looking at is that I wasn't actually letting go of sex. I wasn't giving up sex. What I was doing is I was actually gaining peacefulness. That's actually what I was doing, because I could never be peaceful as long as the mind was craving sex, because sometimes you can get it and sometimes you can't. But when you let go of sexual activity, you're not actually letting go of something. You're actually gaining something, which is this peace and joy. So whether you ever choose to do that or not, it's a choice for you to make. So here, where the Buddha is talking about abandoning unchastity, that's also having sex outside of any relationship that you are committed to. It's also sex with people who are already committed in relationships. He's talking about that up here as well. He says, even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. Or right here where he says, who have a husband, wife, or partner, right? This is people who are either already in a relationship, or if you're in a relationship, going outside your relationship to have sex, this would cause harm. And that's why people in these situations have sometimes gotten murdered. They've gotten beat up or injured. Their personal property has gotten destroyed. They've lost their wealth. They've lost their reputation in the community. This is all the unwholesome results that we experience from not having this wisdom. And this is all helping you to eliminate your craving, your anger, and your ignorance. That's what this precept is for. And then, even though the Buddha is not talking about this up here specifically, we can see that human trafficking, that if someone's being human trafficked, that means they're being forced to have sex against their will. And this would fall under unchastity, because that person's having sex with multiple people. And then if you're going into that environment, yes, you can get murdered, you can get beat up, you can get sexually transmitted diseases, you can get robbed. These are all the unwholesome results, because those types of environments where people are being human trafficked, they're not the safest environments to be in, right? So that's something that you can keep in mind as well. Here's some more things, is that there's some people who actually are giving paid sexual services. They're not doing it against their will. They're actually choosing to give sexual services. Even in those situations, that's still unchastity, going into those situations. And that's why, once again, you can oftentimes get beat up, murdered, robbed, sexually transmitted diseases. You can lose your wealth because you get addicted to this, having sex and paying for it over and over again. These are all things that can happen. It's helpful here to see that the Buddha didn't teach that same gender relationships are harmful. Notice he doesn't include that here. But if you look at his teachings, he was aware of same gender relationships because he was essentially talking about it in his teachings. But he doesn't actually teach anything about it. He was just informing his students that some people prefer, have this type of relationship and some people have these types of relationships. So he didn't include it here because there's no harm. Two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex, they're not causing any harm. And if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, that things are constantly changing and there's no such thing as permanence in this material world, then you understand that it's impossible for every person to be interested in having sex with the opposite gender. If every single person was interested in having sex with the opposite gender, that would be permanence. And we don't live in that world. We live in an impermanent world. So things are constantly changing. So if you have same gender relationships or you know someone who does, they're not causing any harm because it's two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex. Now, if somebody else gets angry because they see that same gender couple together. That's their craving that's causing that anger. They're craving permanence. They want everybody to have sex with the opposite gender. And that's why their anger is coming up, and it's coming from the mind's unknowing of true reality. We can also understand transgender individuals through the teachings of the Buddha, that if you understand the body is one thing and the mind is something completely different, then the idea that the mind is going to end up in a body that identifies the same way as the sexual organs in the body, if that happened that way every single time, that would be permanence. But we understand the universal truth of impermanence. Some people, their mind is going to identify with the sexual organs that the physical body has, but other people's minds are going to identify in a different gender. This is why you can have a mind that identifies as male where the physical organs of the body are female. Or you can have a mind that identifies as a female, but the physical organs of the body are actually male sexual organs. So you can understand this through the universal truth of impermanence, but you could also understand it through the cycle of rebirth. If you understand rebirth, that we've all been different animals at different times, then let's just say somebody was female, 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 and now that mind ends up in a body that has male sexual organs. Well, it's understandable that their mind is still identifying as a female because they were already female in so many different previous existences. So now this mind in this new body is identifying as a female when the sexual organs are male. So this type of thing is normal. It's understandable. The natural laws that the Buddha taught are easily explaining this to us. And again, there's some people that get angry about this. If they see a transgender person, they might get angry or frustrated, but they're causing it themselves. That's their own craving for permanence. That's their own anger. That's their own lack of wisdom that the mind has about these natural laws. So you can understand the whole world around you. Because remember, the teachings of the Buddha aren't giving you beliefs. They're not explaining to you the way the world should be. He's explaining to you the way the world is. And by understanding the way the world is, you can navigate it more peacefully. So you can understand transgender individuals through the teachings of the Buddha. Sometimes people ask me about masturbation because sometimes people have been taught, oh, masturbation's bad. Don't do masturbation. It's going to cause harm. Well, I'm going to talk to you about this so that you can understand it, because in some situations it could cause harm, but in other situations it can actually be quite helpful. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish here, right? So masturbation, if you're decreasing your sensual desire, it actually can be helpful. But if you're increasing your sensual desire, it can actually be harmful. So I'll give you some examples. But first, let me tell you a story. Are you guys familiar with like a dam? Like a multi-million-dollar dam that holds back water, right? When the water is coming up on this multi-million-dollar structure and it's putting pressure on the dam, do you guys know what they do in order to protect the dam and keep it safe? Do you guys know? They open it up, right? They open up the dam and they release the pressure so that the water comes back down, right? So that's what masturbation can actually do for you. If you have a lot of pressure in your mind, where let's just say somebody's listening to this and they have 10 boyfriends or 10 girlfriends, and they're like, you know what? The Buddha was really wise. I should just have one. I'm going to move this down to just one boyfriend or one girlfriend. And now when they do that, they have all this sexual craving in their mind because they've had 10 boyfriends or 10 girlfriends and they've been having sex with all these people, right? And now they're coming down to one partner, but they have all this sexual craving that's built up in their mind as they're trying to get to this just one partner. Well, let's just say they use a little bit of masturbation, and then that helps to release the pressure out of their mind so that they're not craving sex so much. This is actually helpful. This is helping them. Or let's just say somebody was interested in going and raping somebody, and they have all this pressure built up in their mind that they really want to have sex and they want to go rape somebody. But let's just say they masturbate instead. That was helpful, right? That allowed them to not cause harm to somebody else. So masturbation can actually be used in a helpful way, in a beneficial way. But it can also be used in a harmful way. Let's just say somebody was masturbating 10, 20, 25 times a day. This can actually cause harm to your own physical body if you're masturbating that much. But it can increase your central desire. So you need to be able to look at, are you decreasing your central desire or are you increasing your central desire, right? As you're choosing to maybe let go of sexual activity, you might be going longer and longer periods of time without sex, and you might use a little bit of masturbation to kind of help you over that, right? So it can actually be helpful. Sex with animals is one of the few things that's black and white. It's very clear that if somebody had sex with an animal, I suspect that they would get injured, they would get diseases and illnesses. That's why we know that an animal can't give us consent to have sex with it. So it would be unwise to have sex with an animal. Sometimes people ask me about pornography. When someone's interested in pornography, normally what it is they're interested in intimate contact with someone. And sometimes people go into this pornography, and this can cause the mind to get really addicted to that, going into a fantasy world. And it's really hard to come out of that. And oftentimes, even when you come out of it, having sex with a real life partner again doesn't feel quite as fulfilling because that fantasy world was so indulgent. And then when you come out of that, it's really hard to have meaningful connections again. So if you're interested in having intimate contact with someone, I would encourage you to go towards a real live partner rather than pornography. If you're currently using pornography, if you eliminate that, that will actually help your mind to become more peaceful, more joyful, more clear. And there's actually meditations that are helping you to be able to do that. So sometimes students come and talk to me about this privately. If you need help, you're welcome to come talk to me, and I will help you to understand how to get away from pornography. And it can include meditation if you would like to use this meditation that the Buddha taught. Pornography didn't really exist during the lifetime of the Buddha, at least in images. It existed in real life shows, but it didn't exist in terms of magazines and films and things that we have nowadays. But the teachings that he shared actually helps you to overcome this with the meditation. So do you guys have any questions on this third precept about sex, sexual misconduct? Question? Yep. You guys didn't realize you'd be at a temple talking about sex, did you?
So I was just wondering about people who are polyamorous because of the multiple partners. Like, how is that for them? Is it like an exception because they're, let's say, wired that way? Or
so it's not that anybody's wired that way. It's that polyamorous is where you're having sex with multiple people, right? And they've agreed to it, right? Like an open relationship. Okay. So it's not that they're wired that way. It's that the unenlightened mind functions very much like an animal, right? We're not animals, we're human beings, but we function very much like an animal. That's why in the Eightfold Path, when the Buddha talks about right action, he teaches you to eliminate killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, because those are the three things that animals tend to do. And what you're doing to get to the first stage of enlightenment is you're becoming a better and better human being, right? So you need to shed these animalistic instincts. So an individual who's interested in having sex with lots of different people is just a craving. That's all it is. And that can be trained out of the mind. It's not that you're wired that way. It's not like you're stuck in that. It's just that somebody is choosing to do that based on their craving. And even when somebody gives permission, so to speak, and it's an open relationship and everybody agrees that this is okay, it still causes detrimental challenges in the relationship typically. That there's oftentimes a lack of trust in the relationship. There can also be sadness and depression. Again, there can be sexually transmitted diseases. People can still get jealous and have difficulties like that in the relationship. So that's why the Buddha is teaching you to not practice unchastity. But whether someone chooses to do that or not, it's a choice for them to make. But if someone chooses to have an open relationship, they're going to experience unwholesome results because of that. So the Buddha is teaching you to build a loyal, loving, consenting relationship with someone, and you'll see that that'll actually sustain you, and you'll be able to have a very fulfilling life with that person and that partner. But whether somebody chooses to do that or not, it's a choice for them to make. If you have ever had those kinds of relationships, you can see that it produces unwholesome results in the relationship. Whether somebody's willing to admit that or not, that's another question. But you can see if you've ever done that or if you've ever known someone that does that. And if you talk to them, there's all kinds of unwholesome results that they're experiencing. But it's not that the mind or the brain is wired that way. It's just that it has craving in the mind, and that can be eliminated. Okay. All right. I don't see any other question. Another one? Yep.
Hello. Okay. I know sex can be a complex topic in different religions, so I was just thinking of like Christianity, which I know a little bit more about. And so, like, for example, Buddha doesn't specify that sex has to be within like a marriage arrangement. Like, there's nothing about that it has to be formalized in any kind of relationship, just that there's consent and that, actually, I don't know if love is in there, but like a consenting, loving relationship. And that sex doesn't have to have like a purpose necessarily. It's not like you have to do it for procreation. So like recreationally or, just for fun is okay if it's with, consent and love and all that. So just, yeah.
Those kinds of things are rules and commandments. Those are like permanent decisions, right? Like everybody has to be married in order to have sex. That would be permanence. That would be exactly opposite of what the Buddha taught. So that's why he didn't teach those kinds of things. He understood impermanence, that some people are going to be married, some people aren't. That's normal. That's impermanence. So that's why he didn't teach those kinds of things. Yep.
And then the purpose behind sex is nothing.
Yeah, he already knows that it's sensual desire, right? We tend to think about it, and we even call it, we're making love. That's usually what some people call it. Once you understand what love is, you'll understand that sex is not making love. I don't know if you guys are interested in going to this topic today, but oftentimes we kind of fluff it up to make it talk like that. But really what we're doing is it's two individuals stimulating each other's senses to get to this heightened state of mind where ultimately there's an orgasm, right? That's what we're really, truly doing. And we call it making love. And yes, I understand that. And I understand the human connection behind that. I understand that you're doing it with someone that you're very close with and all these kinds of things. And it does create certain feelings in the relationship. But there's all kinds of other challenges with this when we start thinking about it as we're making love. Because as you're with a partner over the course of your relationship, at the beginning of the relationship, the sex is usually very stimulating because it's all new. It's brand new, right? But then over time, it becomes less and less stimulating. Well, if we think this is making love, then when the sex is less stimulating, we'll think that there's less love. So if we start looking at the sexual activity as this is our love, this is a symbol of our love, then that means that when the sex is not quite as fulfilling, we'll think that our love is gone. And now that's where people might break up and choose to go get another partner because they think that the sex is the love, where it's actually not. The sex is not the love. The sex is an activity that we choose to do because we trust each other, and we're doing this activity because we love each other. And now we feel comfortable to do this sex with each other. But the sex itself isn't the love. And it's really helpful to do that because then that'll help you to potentially stay in the relationship where maybe the sex isn't what it was when you first started because it's not as stimulating, because it's not new anymore. You've done it many times and your craving has just diminished. And yeah, it's not as stimulating. But if we think that's the love, we might actually walk out on a relationship that is actually really, really wonderful otherwise. But we're looking at the relationship through this skewed perspective that is causing us to make an unwise decision to maybe leave an otherwise really great relationship.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed there's no reference to love here. So it is divorced concept then in this case.
The sex is not the love.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought you were done. Sex is not the love. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I understand that that's what we talk about it as. I used to talk about it that way too. Yeah. Okay. So now number 4. This one's really straightforward. Abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. So what the Buddha is doing here is teaching you to speak the truth, right? And he's giving you the reasons why inside the precept. Right? So he's not saying do not lie, because that's how people oftentimes talk about this. He's helping you to understand why, because you would like to be a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world, because now your mind can be completely peaceful and joyful when you're only speaking the truth, because all you need to do is look inward and figure out what's the truth, and now let me share that. Whereas if you're lying, and if you've ever done a lot of lying, which some of us have, and as we were children, we did a lot of lying, you know you had to keep your story straight. You had to say, figure out what you said from one person to the next, and it would be very difficult to keep your mind peaceful and joyful if you had to keep your lie straight from person to person to person, right? So the Buddha is teaching you to speak the truth, because that way your mind can be at ease, that you don't have to worry about what you said from one person to the next. He understood this so well that I put this other teaching in here as well to help you see what the Buddha was teaching. Here he's teaching his son, Rahula. Sometimes people think the Buddha left his family and never came back. This isn't actually true. He actually came back, and his son became his student. His wife became his student. Other people of his family became students. This is him teaching his son. His son's name is Rahula. He's explaining to his son that it would be unwise to lie even as a joke. Right? That you might not associate a Buddha as somebody who tells jokes, because you see all these pictures and statues, the Buddha's looking all serious and all this kind of stuff. You might think like, oh, that's what enlightenment is, to be solemn and serious all the time. No, that's not what enlightenment is. Enlightened beings are cheerful and happy and having fun, and they're having a wonderful time, way better than unenlightened beings. Unenlightened beings can only be happy when they're getting what they want. Enlightened beings can be happy all the time, no matter what's going on in their day-to-day life. But unenlightened beings can only be happy when they get what they want. So their happiness is actually minimal. It's actually shrinking. So a Buddha tells jokes, right? You might not associate a Buddha as someone who tells jokes, but a Buddha tells jokes. They're a human being just like you and me. But the difference is that they tell jokes that are the truth, right? Enlightened beings tell jokes that are the truth. These are a lot more challenging, these types of jokes. But usually you have to work at them a little bit more, but people actually laugh at them more, right? So right now, if you're telling jokes that are degrading or diminishing to other people, or they're degrading or diminishing to yourself, I would encourage you not to tell those type of jokes, but instead look for telling jokes that actually are truthful. And it's going to take you a bit more effort to create these kind of jokes, but when you get used to doing it, it actually becomes a lot easier, and those types of jokes are a lot funnier. So do you guys have any questions on this precept here? No questions? Okay. So now the last one, which is actually here at the end for a reason, because if you don't practice this precept, you're more likely to do all the others. Okay. So here the Buddha says, refrain from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. So again, whenever you're reading and studying the teachings of the Buddha, if there's any words that you run across that you're not familiar with, you need to investigate those. So if you ran across this and you didn't know what the word heedlessness means, even if you thought you might know what it means, it's better to just go look it up and investigate it. So I didn't know 100% what this word meant, and I was curious, so I went and looked it up, and this is what it came back with. It means careless, thoughtless, inattentive, uncalm, unaware, or unmindful. So anytime you're putting a substance into the body that's producing unmindfulness, you're actually walking in the opposite direction of enlightenment, because what the Buddha is teaching you to do is cultivate mindfulness or awareness of mind. But if you're putting a substance into the body that's producing unmindfulness or careless, thoughtless, inattentive, then you're actually walking in the opposite direction of enlightenment. So the Buddha teaches in this way that is timeless, that he's teaching you in a way that it can apply to any number of substances during his life and long into the future, because he could have never imagined all the different substances that we would have invented. So that's why he taught in this way, because he understood impermanence. He understood the world was going to change. So he didn't just give you a list of all the substances that could potentially produce heedlessness. He just gave you the precept that whenever you're putting a substance into the body, if it's promoting this lack of mindfulness, then it's actually unwise to take it, because now you're more likely to make decisions to kill, to steal, to have sexual misconduct, or to lie. And now you're producing all kinds of unwholesome kamma. You know, if you go to like a prison or a jail and you ask those people, why are you here? They might say, oh, I murdered someone, or, oh, I robbed a bank. But if you're like, no, like really, like, why are you here? They would say, oh, I would have never murdered that person if I wasn't high on drugs. It was drugs that led me to jail. Or I would have never robbed that bank if I wasn't feeding a drug habit, right? So this particular precept is really important, because if you're not practicing this, you're more likely to kill, steal, have sexual misconduct, or lie. And now you're producing all kinds of unwholesome kamma. So what I've done here is I've listed just a few of substances that we can talk about because it's not black and white, just like all the rest of them. We can talk about these, but remember, this isn't an exhaustive list because there's other substances beyond this. But I'll just talk about these so that you can see how to apply this in your day-to-day life. So for example, this substance of marijuana, we know that this plant has medical properties. It's irrefutable. They've actually done studies where there's been children that will have maybe 20 seizures a day, and they've been doing that for multiple years. And they give them a little bit of CBD oil on the tongue, and they don't have another seizure for like 6 months, right? So they know that this plant has medical properties, but it can also be used as a high too. So depending on how somebody's using it, it can affect you differently. And only you are going to know how you're actually using this plant. If you're using it for a high, you're usually looking for a high THC content in the plant. And if you're looking for medical properties, you're usually looking for a high CBD. These are the two parts of the plant, THC and CBD. And oftentimes, if you're taking it as a medical use, you're usually going to use it as an oil or an edible. And sometimes when people are taking it for a high, they're going to smoke it, which causes harm to the lungs. But you could also use it as an edible too to be able to get high, right? So you need to be able to look at your own reasons for using this. And if you're using this for stress or anxiety or anything like that, that's not a medical purpose because stress and anxiety isn't going to be solved by marijuana. The stress and anxiety is actually being caused by the craving, desire, attachment in the mind. So if somebody was using marijuana thinking that they were going to eliminate their stress and anxiety, it's just covering it up. And now when the cravings, desires, attachments are there, there's still going to be stress and anxiety. So for an individual, you guys need to look at this if you're going to choose to use this plant and see if you really truly have a medical reason to use it or not. And you'll know for yourself if you're using it for a high or if you're using it for a medical purpose. We know that cigarettes don't have any medical purpose, and this is why more and more people have moved away from this. At one time, we were seeing a lot of cancers and stuff like this, where now that is kind of diminished over time. But there's still people that do smoke. If you're currently smoking, I would encourage you to move away from that because you're going to experience improved results. Because when you're smoking, it's causing harm to the physical body. This is the unwholesome Kamma because of the craving. Remember, each one of these are helping you eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance. So if you're smoking, that's just the mind having craving. And the way that you would like to eliminate this is gradually. That's what I would encourage you to do because the mind doesn't like change. It doesn't like impermanence. So if you're currently smoking, say 20 cigarettes a day, you might go down to 18 for like a week or 2 or 3. And then maybe you go down to 15 for a week or 2 or 3. And then you go down to 12. And you can just gradually taper it off like this, allowing the body and the mind to adjust to this. You'll tend to find this is a more sustainable change. And you can do this with things that are unwholesome, that you're gradually diminishing, but you can also do it with wholesome things. If you're putting wholesome things into your life, you can just gradually do that. It's a more sustainable change for you. You need to even pay attention to your prescription medications because some prescription medications can be addicting. And luckily or fortunately, we live in the information age that we can check these things out. That if you're in a doctor's office and they write you a prescription, you can actually look right there on your device to see is it addictive or not. And if you see that it's addictive, you could consult with a doctor and say, hey, doctor, is there another medicine that I could use besides this one? And they might say, sure, here you go. Here's a new prescription. Wonderful. You just improved your results there. That's a decision that you made that is now producing wholesome Kamma for you. But what you might get back from the doctor is no, there's no other prescription that I can give you. This is the only one for your situation. Well, if that's what you know, that you know coming out of the doctor's office that this medicine is addictive, that's really good for you to know. That's really good wisdom because now you know that this substance is addictive and you would like to be able to get off of it as soon as possible. So I encourage you to research any kind of medications that you're putting into the body so that you'll have that understanding and now you can make wise decisions to either switch to a different medicine or to get off of that medicine as soon as possible. Even caffeine, this is a substance that produces heedlessness. It's not to the same level as like heroin or cocaine or something like this, but it does produce heedlessness. And what this does is it's going to take your mind up into this excited state and more energy, and then you're going to drop off. So you might even decide to start paying attention to your caffeine intake and even eliminating this, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll have sustainable energy all day long where you don't get tired. You'll get sleepy, but you don't get tired. You don't get exhausted. But you're never going to be able to build that in your mind if you rely on something like caffeine, because it's going to take your mind up into having energy, and then you're going to crash and come down on the other side. So as long as you're using this stimulant, it doesn't allow the mind to build the sustainable energy all day long. And if you decide you're going to get rid of caffeine, you might notice that as you're getting rid of it, that you experience withdrawal symptoms. Let this be a reminder to you that you're detoxing from a drug, that you're detoxing from a stimulant. You might get headaches, you might get shakes, you might get dry mouth. This is all the side effects or the withdrawal symptoms because you're detoxing from a substance. So you might pay attention to your caffeine. We also know that sugar in high volumes can actually produce heedlessness too, that we kind of learned that as a child. And usually as we get older, we tend to not do these kinds of things, but that's something to keep in mind as well. And then sometimes you'll hear people that will say that psychedelic substances are actually helping you to be able to get to enlightenment. This is actually untrue. There's nothing about a psychedelic substance that is actually helping you to get to enlightenment. What a psychedelic substance does is it does promote this introspection where your mind, based on a substance, is able to look inward. But as long as you're allowing your mind to do that based on a substance, you're never actually developing that naturally so that your mind can actually have that for a sustainable period of time. Because in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to be introspective at all times during your day. You can't just rely on a substance to be introspective, right? So if you were in your meeting with your boss and your boss was asking you some really important questions, you can't be like, hey, hold on, boss, I need to go drop this hit of LSD. I'll be right back. I really need to think about that question you just asked me about. I'll be right back, right? You can't do that, right? You need to be introspective. When someone's asking you a question, when there's certain things that are happening in your day-to-day life, you need to be able to look inward and come up with an answer for certain decisions that you're making. So if you rely on a substance like a psychedelic substance, your mind's never producing and creating that introspection that you need in order to be able to get to enlightenment, where you can cultivate that inwardly. So if you hear people that are sharing that psychedelic substances are helping you to get to enlightenment, this is a big misunderstanding that they're having. And you can see this by the things that I'm just sharing with you here. The way that I think about it is it's kind of like if I was walking on a sidewalk and I was looking inside of a store and I saw this beautiful handbag inside the store. Maybe I'm looking through the window of the store and I see this beautiful handbag and it's like, oh, wow, I'd really like to go in there. I can see this handbag and I can look at it and it looks really beautiful. I'd really like to go into that store and touch it and feel it and maybe purchase it. But I'm actually chained down to the sidewalk outside. So that's what the psychedelic substances are doing, is you're kind of looking inward at the mind and you're kind of seeing some things, seeing some introspection that kind of looks like maybe some things that are part of enlightenment, but you can't ever really go and touch it and actually experience enlightenment permanently because the mind is still on these substances. So if you're using these, I would encourage you to move away from that stuff. If you hear people that are saying that these actually help you to get to enlightenment, it's not actually true, because your mind's never going to be able to cultivate the introspection that you need for a long-term basis as long as your mind's using these. So any questions on this? Remember, this is not an exhaustive list. There's other substances and there will be other substances long in the future. But if you understand this word heedlessness, then you can apply it in all situations. Any questions? No questions? Okay. I don't see any online here either. All right. So what I'll do then is just end by thanking you guys for coming. Thank you for your interest to learn. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your dedication to growing and learning. As you guys see, that when you're learning the teachings of the Buddha, you're going to hear things that are maybe different than what you currently think about the world. And like I mentioned to you, that's a very good thing. And some of these things you need to step away from, you need to think about, and you need to be able to ask more questions. You need to reflect on it. And sometimes what I've seen people do, not necessarily you guys, but I've seen people do this in the past, is if they go to a place like this and somebody's sharing things opposite of what they currently think about the world, they'll be like, oh, I can't learn that stuff because it doesn't match with what I currently think about the world. Well, in that kind of situation, you're going to just continue to stay in the unenlightened state because your mind's not growing wisdom. Sometimes you might think about this as like spiritual shopping, that a student might be looking for a teacher who already currently thinks the way that they think. So that way the teacher is just validating and reinforcing the things that you already think about the world. But remember, this individual who's the Buddha, who figured out how to get to enlightenment, who had deep, deep, deep wisdom. His wisdom is way up here about what it takes to get to enlightenment. And as an unenlightened being, even though we're all equal, just in terms of the wisdom, an unenlightened being's wisdom is down here. So in order to get to enlightenment, you need to build your wisdom to understand. So right now in the unenlightened state, of course, the mind doesn't think the same way as an enlightened being. But the more you understand what the teachings are and what an enlightened being is thinking and how they look at the world through the natural law of Kamma, more and more you can cultivate that wisdom and understand that wisdom. So this is something that I'm sure you heard at least 1 or 2 or maybe 5 or 10 things that I shared that are different than what you currently think about the world. And in my opinion, that's a very good thing. And rather than just pushing this kind of thing away and be like, I can't learn that because it's different than what I currently think about the world. Instead, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions, think about what it is that's being shared, and then maybe step away, think about it some more, and then even come back and ask some more questions. And that's where the person is really growing and developing rather than just looking for somebody who currently thinks in the same way that they currently think. Because if you're in the unenlightened state, in your mind's experiencing anger and sadness and all these other discontent feelings, there's certain wisdom about the world that the mind doesn't currently understand. And you need to be able to grow and develop and be able to see these truths that the Buddha is actually teaching you. And I find it to be very admirable when people come here to be able to learn these kinds of things, because it's very easy to go to a place and just believe a bunch of things, right? And maybe do worship and prayer and rituals, but then life is really hard afterwards because you haven't really learned any wisdom to be able to improve your life. It's a lot more challenging to come to a place like this where the things that are being taught are different than the way you currently think. And you have to think about these things and consider these things and hear things that are different than what you currently think. But then as you do that and you cultivate wisdom, your life is a lot easier later, because now you have the wisdom to be able to actually face the world and make wiser decisions. So I find it very admirable when people come here to do this inner work and this inner growth and this inner development. So this is why I start each one of my classes with a thank you and showing you respect. And this is why I end each one of my classes with a thank you and showing you respect for the hard work that you're doing to be able to learn and understand and challenge some of the things that you currently think about the world. And I understand that that can be very challenging. So that's why I make myself available during these retreats and after the retreats so that you guys can continue to get help for as long as you'd like. So thank you for your dedication to learning and growing and developing and becoming a better person, because it's helping you, it's helping all those around you, and it's helping all of humanity. Because as you become a more loving, kind, gentler individual, it's going to help you to have more peace and joy. It's going to help the people around you because you're not causing as much harm to the people around you. And it's helping all of humanity become a loving, more warm and gentle society. So thank you for your dedication to learning. And perhaps I'll see you guys tomorrow for class. The class tomorrow, what I'm going to be teaching is we're starting off with loving kindness meditation. I'm going to teach you guys about this using the words of the Buddha to help you understand that. Then we're going to actually do loving kindness meditation together. This is a meditation that helps you eliminate anger, hatred, and ill will, and all the lesser versions like anger, frustration, even the slightest dislike, even the slightest annoyment. You can eliminate that from the mind. Then I'm going to teach you this natural law of Kamma. I'm going to teach you 4 types of Kamma. What is the 4 types of kamma, and I'm going to actually teach you how to extinguish all your unwholesome kamma. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you will no longer experience any unwholesome kamma. You will only be experiencing wholesome kamma. Then I'm going to teach you what is merit. After our break, I'll teach you what is merit. This is a particular type of wholesome kamma. Then tomorrow, our excursion is to go to the orphanage. This is where we're going to, if you guys would like, it's up to you. We're going to put together some resources. We're going to go to the store, buy a bunch of resources for them, and then take them to the orphanage, spend some time there getting to know about the orphanage, and then we'll come back. If you guys would like to go to this, you're more than welcome. And then when we come back after that, then I'm going to teach you some more, which is after we do our loving kindness meditation, I'm going to teach you understanding and experiencing the jhanas. The light bulb is flickering. This is the point tomorrow evening where we start moving towards all the teachings that you need in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. The things that I've already been teaching you, you need to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. But now this is going to be the more targeted teaching specifically to get to the first stage of enlightenment. So you'll start seeing the retreat kind of pivot tomorrow evening, that we're going to start focusing on some other topics other than just some of the foundational topics. So while we're here, can I just see who is considering going to the orphanage tomorrow so that I can just organize transportation? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I'm 7. Okay, and there'll probably be some people tomorrow too. Did you have your hand up, sir, back there with the hat? Did you have your hand up? I didn't. Okay, so I'll talk about it tomorrow. You can come talk to me if you'd like. We'll have 7. So I'll plan transportation for 1 van. And then if there's other people that would like to join in, we'll have space because they can usually take up to 10 or 12 in 1 van. Okay, so have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your evening, whatever you do. And perhaps I'll see you guys tomorrow. Sawadee Kap. Sawadee Kap.